Shalom and good evening. Now, we know here in the Americas, they have licenses to do pretty much anything they want to do when it comes to history, when it comes to certain laws and, privileges or whatnot. That's just facts. But when we talk about the education, when we talk about people's lineages and so forth, we know that they are presented as a Caucasian figure or so-called white people. Now, what they've done is they turn all notable figures of prominent king, queen status, whatnot, into a Caucasian seed line or bloodline. Because when you think of Caucasians here in the Americas, even our own people look at them as royalty or look at them as benevolent being that can't do wrong. Some of our people, the ones that are still, in delusion. But when we look at these historical figures and based on the etymology of words, because we have the 1828 Webster's American Dictionary, and we can look up some of these words in specific time periods because words change, right? So knowing that, when we read these other books, old book, about the characteristics of these, prominent figures, then we can get a grasp of, okay, this is why they have artistic license. This is fabricated. King Arthur was not a so-called white man. And of course, you got the liberals or the conservatives, whatever side. This is not no woke shit. It's just teaching from the real historical aspects, who these people were. And they were not Caucasian. They were not a dark white. They always want to make up some fictitious term or whatnot. But these people were people of color. Because what they've done is, what the Caucasian like to do is they like to put so-called black people into a box and just say Africa. But the Bible, we know it goes off of seed lines. Okay? Seed line or blood lines. Because our people are everywhere. So let's get started. Silures. The swarthy faces of the Silures, the curly quality in general of their hair, and the position of Spain opposite their shores attest to the passage of Iberians in old days, the occupation by them of these districts. Tacitus Annales. So even Tacitus is letting you know that the Silures were a tribe of people of color, Iberian Negroes. So that makes you wonder, why do they have King Arthur as a so-called Caucasian or white person? And of course, they might say he was a dark white. No, that's just a term that they've made up. There's no such thing as a dark white. Now we're at etymology.com. Complexion. The specific meaning, color, or hue of the skin of the face, developed by mid-15th century. In medieval physiology, the color of the face was believed to indicate temperament or health. Okay, number one, complexion. Now, the coloring of a person's face, as we can see in the illustration. So right here you have an illustration of people of color, so-called black people in modern term. Now there's one specific person that doesn't have what you will call a swarthy or brunette color. Now, can we point them out in this picture? Yes, we can. Now, when we look at the picture of King Arthur, we know that the Silures were dark-complected people based on the historical context in the books that are presented. We're not just talking out of our asses. We're actually reading and trying to comprehend things here. So now we're at the word swarthy. Dark color, especially of the skin. 1580s unexplained alteration of swarthy. 1570s from swarthy. Swarthiness. Definitions from WordNet. Swarthy, adjective, naturally having skin of a dark color. Okay, this is not rocket science. So when we read these books and they're given the description of the people, you have some of these high IQ or people who are in self-denial because these people did not look like you. They look more like these people on the screen, minus the pale Caucasian right there on the bottom right. So now we're going to a quick Google search. Was King Arthur a Silure? Arthur was a prince of the tribe of Britons called Silures, whose country was South Wales, the son of Uther, named Pendragon, a title given to an elected sovereign paramount over the many kings of Britain. Okay, so King Arthur was a Silure. And truth be told, Robin Hood and Little John, were men of color as well. I mean, you can't make this shit up. So now we're at the book Ancient and Modern Britain, Volume 1. Now we're at the Silurian Picts, okay? Start off right here. But our islands contained other races at that period. When the war with the Silures, who occupied territories in the southwest, brought them, the Romans, in contact with that people, Tacitus records the result of their observation. Their complexion, which means hue, skin of the face, was different and of a darker hue. Their hair was curly and they resembled the Iberians. Okay? So what color was King Arthur? He wasn't a so-called white man or Caucasian. Now we're going to look at the etymology of the word Silures, where it comes from. The Latin word Silures is of a Celtic origin, perhaps derived from the common Celtic root silo, seed. Words derived from this root in Celtic languages, e.g. Old Irish, Welsh, keyword Welsh, are used to mean blood stock descendants, lineage, offspring, as well as seed in a vegetable sense, or sperm, your bloodline. Silures might therefore mean kindred stock, perhaps referring to a tribal belief in a descent from an originating ancestor. So now we're going to go to the top right corner, semantic enigmas. Why do so many so-called African Americans have Welsh names? Venus Williams, Colin Powell, Floyd Patterson. Common thought relates the names to slave owners, but there were very few Welsh slave owners in the American South. Most Welsh immigrants to the U.S. ended up in the steel and coal industry in the North. Key word, common thought relates the names to slave owners. So they want you to equate black equals slavery, surnames equal slavery, white equals master. Okay, but we know once we study certain books, the etymology of words, that's not the case. Your surname, 9 times out of 10, is your origin of where you come from. Okay, but Welsh equals black names. So now we're on page 44. I'm going to read some of the highlighted points on 45 as well. But at any rate, the people known as Iberians were spread all over the British islands, whether indigenous or immigrants, and some of their tribes were known as Domini and Silures. This seems to be generally admitted. Physically, they were swarthy, as we read earlier, of color, and had curly hair and were bearded like goats, as was Merlin. Because Merlin, if you believe in the story, you know, he was a brother or a man of color, okay? They, or some clans of them, worship the gods, and both man and woman professed a knowledge of the future. So then the Druids and the Druidists, who had colleges in an island near the coast of Brittany, okay? Those were our people, our ancestors, who professed a knowledge of the future, who, the man at least, were figured as bearded like goats, and who worshiped the gods, were dark-skinned, curly-haired Iberians, the tribe of the Silures or Domini. This seems a fair inference. Page 45, British Iberians. I'm going to read on the second paragraph. The Iberians are styled swarthy and curly-haired. The word swarthy is a rather classic for, although literally swartz, yet it is taken, I fancy, to mean something not quite so dark as the color of the Negro, and that's his opinion, and he's wrong in its usual exception. Perhaps this distinction does not exist, but at any rate, if the small dark Highlander...
How's that?
That's good.
Yeah? Good? Thanks, guys.
So now we're going to look up the word Celt. To tuck up mid-14th century, surviving in Scottish, a word of Scandinavian origin. Compare Danish Celt, to truss, to tuck up. Swedish Kelta, swaddle. Okay, now the definitions from WordNet. Celt, noun, a knee-length plaited tartan skirt worn by men as part of the traditional dress in the Highlands of northern Scotland. I repeat, the northern Highlands, or the Highlands of northern Scotland. And the Black Celts, with a K, to the west of the Shannon, be assumed to be the descendants of Iberians. Okay? It may fairly be argued that with so much intermixture with fair races during the last 2,000 years, the stock must now be light-skinned. Then its representatives of the first century must have been actually as black as Negroes. As a matter of fact, Philly characterizes their complexion as Ethiopian, that is, as black as a Ethiopian. Now, if we read Amos 9 and 7, what does it say in the scripture? Amos 9 and 7, are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel, says the Most High? Have not I brought up Israel out of the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Captor, and the Syrians from Ker? Okay. And it may be that the curlessness of their hair was the same nature as a Negro's also. I mean, they were the same stock. They were the same peoples. Thus, the Negritos of Huxley, the owners of such skulls as those found in Caithness, may have been aligned to the ancient Iberians. That wild tribe of Ireland were black men, as hinted by the fact that a wild Irishman is in Gaelic a black Irishman. So now we're going to look up Arthur. We know that Arthur is of a Welsh lineage. Okay, and let's read what it says here. The origin of the Welsh name Arthur remains a matter of debate. It's not really a debate because you got modern Caucasians or so-called white people that want to fabricate and still hold up a lie about even folklore or myths or whatnot about certain peoples, tribes, and lineages and so forth. So now we're looking at the etymology of the word, but possibly of Macedonian or Etruscan origin. Okay, so we're going to look up the Etruscans. Now we know that the Etruscans were the original people of Italy, so-called black people or people of color, swarthy, etc. These were not your pale or Caucasians of today that you see in these lands. And there's many proof, many books, evidence on who the original people were of Italy. So a little information on the Etruscans. The Etruscans were members of the ancient civilization of Ithria, if I'm pronouncing that right, a country in what is now Italy. Their urban, keyword urban, civilization is though to have started well before 800 BC, but its true beginnings cannot be ascertained. I don't know about that, because their literature, especially the Etrusca Disciplina, the Etruscan books of cult and divination, were collected and burned in the 5th century AD by white Christian elements. Well, that says it all, right? Some say the Etruscans were originally Pelasians, the original people of Greece. Some say they were Pyrrhonians, immigrants from Anatolia. But both of those theories seem to miss the fact that the entire area was inhabited by black people since about 4,500 or 45,000, BC, when Grimalda man first entered Europe. Therefore, there is absolutely no reason why the Etruscans could not have evolved in situ. So as we can see, we have an Etruscan sun god 500 BC. Looks like a black angel, right? Right here we have an altar with our Aphrodite and Adonis, Taurus, Italy, 400 through 375 BC. And we look at their characteristics. These are quote unquote black people. See the nose, broad lips, coarse hair, and so forth. Looks like an earring, broad nose, big lips, whatnot, or broad lips. Same thing right here, okay? People of color, and then you can see the paint too a little bit, the hue right here, okay? So let's zoom out a little bit. Right here. Let's see. Etruscan 500 through 400 BC. Look like the afro, white nose, white lips, okay? And right here you have a Etruscan vase, 325 BC. Features of a Negroid or so-called black woman. Okay, right here, same thing. People of color. The hairstyles is a dead giveaway. So now we're back at the origin of the Anglo-Saxon race, a study of the settlement of England and the tribal origin of the Old English people. Okay. Page 222. Of all the counties in England at the present time, Cornwall has the darkest people. Its pre-Saxon inhabitants do not appear to have been all of one race or sea line. Some were descendants probably of the Neolithic or Old Iberian stock, and some of the people of the Bronze Age. The former were long-headed, the later were broad-headed. Beto recognizes three race types among the Cornish people. Number one, the Neolithic or Iberian, which were so-called people of color. Number two, the British or Bronze, broad-headed. Number three, the Saxon or other Teutonic invaders. The physical type which struck his eye most in Cornwall was the first crossed by the second. Now the name Arthur is an English and Welsh surname with several possible meanings. Number one, last name meaning strong man, from Ar meaning man and Thor meaning strong. Number two, a surname meaning bear man, hero, or man of strength, from the Welsh Arth meaning bear and Ur, a ending meaning man. Number three, from the Gaelic Artar, Middle Gaelic Artur, both derived from the Old Irish Art meaning a bear. Okay. So when you look at all the historical context of, the different books, Ancient and Modern Britons, Volume 1 and 2, the origins of the Anglo-Saxons, with a simple Google search, you'll notice that these places were inhabited by the majority of people of color. I'm not going to say Caucasians didn't exist in that time period, but they were not in a ruling class, stature, so forth. But peace and shalom.